We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah. My question is to the Prime Minister. When was the government advised that 6 shipments of vital fuel supply bound for Australia were cancelled? And as of today, how many ships have been cancelled?
The call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. We are in constant engagement with all of the importers and all of the receivers of these supplies. It is on a daily basis. The Minister notified publicly, said publicly yesterday on the Insiders program exactly what the circumstances were. When it comes to fuel security, obviously, there are global challenges. We are visited today by the head of the International Energy Agency. I look forward to meeting with him after question time today. And we're having a series of meetings as well with our international partners, making sure that we can secure supply. I can inform the House that at 1 o'clock I had a very good discussion with Prime Minister Lawrence Wong of Singapore. And we are issuing now a joint statement on energy security. People would be conscious that after the closure of 4 of Australia's 6, 4 of the 6, then
the Manager on a point of order.
Thanks, Speaker, and it goes to direct relevance. You can't get a more specific question. When were you advised that the 6 shipments were cancelled, and have any more been cancelled since then? You cannot get more direct.
Resume your seat. The Prime Minister did answer that part of the question when he indicated the timeline. Order when he referred to the Minister's statements yesterday. So I'm listening carefully regarding that part of the question, but the Prime Minister is now giving information to the House on fuel security and fuel arrangements, and I assume that will also deal with the second part of the question, was about fuel supply and any cancellations. So the Prime Minister is being directly relevant. He did address the first part of the question that the Manager raised in maybe the first 20 seconds of his answer.
Speaker, I find it extraordinary that they would interrupt an answer talking directly about what has happened in the last hour to secure Australia's energy security. And the statement that we have said is we are committed to working together to strengthen energy supply chain resilience, including by deepening regional cooperation, accelerating renewable energy transition, addressing unjustified import and export restrictions, and maintaining open trade flows. We are talking with our partners in Korea, in Japan, in China, in Singapore. We are engaged. We are reliable partners when it comes to energy security, and we expect that to be a two-way flow. And I tabled the joint statement on energy security by myself and Prime Minister Wong.
Call to the honourable member for Whitlam.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister update the House on the impact of the war in the Middle East and outline the action being taken to boost Australia's fuel security and supply?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Whitlam for her question, and we know that the war in the Middle East is impacting Australia like it's impacting the entire world. Big spikes in demand for fuel have pushed prices up, and there are shortages in some areas as supply chains work to keep up. We know that that is causing frustration. That's why our government is taking action with a plan for Australia's fuel security, by securing fuel supply for Australian industry and households, cracking down on price gouging through the actions of the ACCC, shielding Australians from global energy price spikes, focusing on stability and affordability for gas users in particular. Of course, that's critical for the manufacturing sector, and we're strengthening our resilience to future shocks We've released 20% of the national fuel reserves, so more fuel gets to where it's needed. And we've made sure that all the fuel made here in Australia is used here in Australia. And we've given Australian oil refineries the certainty that they need to make more fuel here. When we left office, there were 6 of those refineries. When we returned to office, there were 2.
Order.
There were 2. But we've made sure that we still have 2. That we still have 2 with the announcements that we have made. And last week, National Cabinet established a fuel supply task force. I've early on today spoken with Singaporean Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, and we're continuing to engage. All of this action builds on our agenda of the past 4 years to strengthen our national resilience and our economic security, investing in a future made in Australia, making more things here as a critical part of our agenda for government, keeping industry on shore, building our sovereign capability and our resilience. Now, we'll work calmly, methodically, always in the national interest, building on what we've achieved, working together, shielding our nation from the worst of global uncertainty.
Give the call to the Leader of the Opposition, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Energy.
Order.
When was the Minister advised that 6 shipments of vital fuel supply bound for Australia were cancelled, and how many ships have been cancelled to date?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. As the government has made crystal clear in recent days and weeks, every expected delivery of fuel has arrived on schedule to this point. We have also made crystal clear at every opportunity that there has been uncertainty from mid to late April onwards. That's been consistent. That has been consistent in every single statement we've made. As the Prime Minister has indicated, we're in constant contact. I have spoken to the Chief Executives of Ampol and Viva every day, in effect, sometimes several times a day. Sometimes several times a day, the Chief Executives of the 2 refineries in Australia. They have been advising me of the uncertainty from mid-April onwards. They have also been advising me more recently of the 6 cancellations, which is still the current number, and several of those have been replaced with new sources. As I said very transparently on Insiders yesterday, hid away in an interview on the ABC, that 6 out of the 81 expected deliveries over that time have been cancelled or deferred and have now, to at least some degree, been replaced with new supply.
Order. Give a call to the honourable member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Middle East conflict impacting global energy and fuel supply chains? What actions has the government taken to ensure Australia is prepared?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for the question. And whether it is liquid fuels in petrol or diesel or electricity, we enter this international crisis, which the visiting Chief Executive of the International Energy Agency has said is the worst we have ever faced today. We enter this crisis better prepared than ever before. We certainly had that as the case when it comes to liquid fuels, and on Saturday we updated our supply figures to show that there are 38 days worth of petrol and 30 days worth of diesel and jet fuel in Australia as we speak. In Australia, Mr Speaker, held where Australian strategic reserve should be. So we are able to release some of that in relation to diesel and petrol on the condition that it flows to regional Australia, and more than 500 million litres is flowing to regional Australia as we speak.
Minister will pause. The member for Lyne has been injecting 14 times in 10 minutes. That is completely unacceptable. We had a lot of interjections the last fortnight. I'm giving everyone fair warning right now. That's not going to be the same that happened last fortnight. So the member for Lyne will remove herself from the chamber for continual interjecting. It's just not the way this House will be conducted with myself as Speaker. when the House comes to order, when the Leader of the Opposition ceases interjecting or responding, when everyone ceases interjecting then. Order. When the House comes to order, and only when the House comes to order, the minister is going to be heard. Order. Order. The minister will continue.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We've been able to release 20% of that, as I said, and we could release it because it's in Australia. Until 2023, that was not the case. And if we'd had to release it from Texas on the 28th of February, it still wouldn't be here today, Mr Speaker, because it takes about 30 days to get from Texas to Australia. And under previous administrations, the only release we could have had was the then Energy Minister saying, "Houston, we have a problem." Mr Speaker, that was the only energy security plan we had. But not just when it comes to liquid fuel, also electricity. And, Mr Speaker, the honourable member for Banks would be pleased with the release of the draft default market offer, which shows his constituents get a 4.6% reduction in energy prices and small businesses 10.1%, Mr Speaker, under the draft default market offer, which has been released publicly, not hidden from the Australian people, but released for all to see. And also, Mr Speaker, I am pleased we are better prepared for this crisis because we are saving more renewable energy for the night through the day, and that reduces our reliance on gas. In the last summer of the previous government, we used 2.7 terawatt-hours worth of gas. In this summer just gone, 1.5 terawatt-hours. A very big reduction in gas use, which means we are less exposed to gas prices, and that is in no small part due to home batteries, Mr Speaker. And I'm pleased to tell the House that since the 1st of July we have installed 286,831 home batteries, and 1,987 of those have been in the electorate of Banks. And also, Mr Speaker, for those Australians who have not been able to access those, the member for Banks and I the other week launched the Padstow Community Battery, which will enable access to renewable energy to 10,000 houses in his electorate, Mr Speaker. 10,000 houses for the Padstow Community Battery. Now, all this not only leads to reduced energy prices and lower emissions, but increased sovereign capability when it comes to energy, Mr Speaker, because the sun does not need to go through the Straits of Hormuz and Vladimir Putin cannot interrupt the wind in Australia. It makes our energy system more resilient, more reliable, more sovereign. We on this side of the House think that's a good thing.
Before I call the member for Ryan, I'll just do some quick acknowledgements for the House. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is Joe Kelly, the member for Greenslopes in the Queensland State Parliament, accompanied by Dave McDermott, the chair of Parkinson, Queensland, as guests, the member for Griffith. Give a call to the honourable member for Ryan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Corporate profiteering by big gas corporations skyrocketed after the invasion of Ukraine, causing rising power bills. And it's happening again thanks to Trump and Netanyahu's war on Iran, which you support. These corporations literally take Australian gas for free and make obscene profits from it. Will you put a 25% tax on gas exports?
Call to the Minister for Resources and the Minister for Northern Australia.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. Just to clarify, the budget will be delivered in May, and I'm not going to comment on any processes in the meantime. I would just clarify that the oil and gas industry contributed almost $12 billion in taxes in 2023-2024. We reformed the petroleum resources rent tax to deliver a fairer return to the Australian community from their natural resources. These changes to the PRRT ensure that offshore gas companies pay more tax sooner, and, as I said, deliver a greater return to the Australian people. These changes provide industry and investors policy certainty to allow sufficient supply of domestic gas and ensure Australia remains a reliable international energy supplier and investment partner. And as everyone would imagine, everyone knows here, that's very important, and important now more than ever. We are working to ensure multinationals, including gas companies, pay their fair share of tax in Australia. Obviously, the PRRT only applies to offshore tax exporters as opposed to those that are onshore in Queensland, which is a different matter. But nonetheless, all of the gas companies do pay a significant amount of tax in this country. They also employ over 80,000 Australians and contribute quite heartily to the regions right around the country. And I thank the member for her question.
Call to the honourable member for Sturt.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government working with the Malinowskis government to deliver for South Australians? How will this also benefit all Australians?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the fantastic member for Sturt for the question. It was a pleasure to be with the member for Sturt on Saturday with Jen Roberts, our candidate for Hartley, and the newly elected member for Hartley, along with Premier Peter Malinowskis. And I do want to take the opportunity to congratulate the Premier of South Australia on his outstanding election victory. The result reflects the focus, energy and determination of the South Australian government, working closely with the national government as well on matters that make a real difference to the lives of South Australians. On Friday, I was in Whyalla at the, of course, steel facility there, and talking with workers who would have now been unemployed were it not for the joint intervention by the federal and the South Australian government to make sure that we continue to make steel here, that we continue to create those jobs which are good jobs. When I went with Premier Malinowskis a year ago, there were 7 apprentices at that site. Today there are 76. It is employing more, training more, contributing more to prosperity. And the other group that we met there was, of course, many of the contractors as well, the suppliers who make a difference. If you take away that facility from Whyalla, it would indeed really suffer. But because of that work, it has made an enormous difference for our sovereign capability going forward. In addition to that, we have very important agreements that we've signed with the South Australian government, the hospitals agreement that's making an enormous difference, the opening of urgent care clinics and making a difference there, as well as, of course, properly funding every single school in South Australia. South Australia is leading the country when it comes to building more new homes, including just one of the sites I went to in the northern suburbs there, along with our member, 17,000 additional homes. 7,000 of those reserved for first home buyers, making an enormous difference going forward. And of course, South Australia is front and centre of our AUKUS arrangements, of the nuclear-powered submarines. We're training people, the connections that are there with the trade schools that have been established under the Malinowskis government, providing those career opportunities and secure work for South Australians as we go forward. More homes, more jobs, more Australian manufacturing. I look forward to working with the Malinowskis government over the years to come and continuing the success that our partnership is bringing the people of South Australia.
The Manager of Opposition, resume your seat. Resume your seat. When someone is on their feet, do not approach them while they're concluding their answer. It's just a habit that's been starting to come in, and we're going to cease that as a way of... Now, the Manager has the call.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Energy. When were you advised that 6 shipments of vital fuel supply bound for Australia were cancelled?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Energy.
Mr Speaker, I refer the honourable member to my previous answer, which was that we have been in constant contact every day, usually more than once a day, with the chief executives of the energy companies. They have been telling me that there was uncertainty from mid-April onwards, which is what I've said publicly. And yesterday, Mr Speaker, we went out and confirmed that 6 cancellations, which are not now, which are scheduled for April, have been cancelled or delayed, and largely have been replaced, Mr Speaker. Now, that is what updating the Australian people factually is about. The alternative is to mislead the Australian people, Mr Speaker.
Has the Minister concluded his answer? Has the Minister concluded his answer? The Manager on a point of order.
Thanks, Speaker. And it goes to relevance. You can't ask a simpler question and we just want a simple answer.
The manager is seeking a date, time and place of when something occurred. Order. The member for Barker and the Leader of the Opposition was just interjecting while I deal with this point of order. So the manager is seeking a date, place or time, an exact figure or time. I understand where you're coming from. Where I'm coming from is that the I can't compel the minister to answer the question as you would like. I'll do my best, but he needs to be directly relevant to ensure the question he was asked. Unfortunately, I can't deliver at the moment what you would like, but I'll listen carefully.
Perhaps,
Order.
Mr Speaker.
The minister in continuation.
I'll have another go at explaining to the opposition. These orders were not all cancelled on the same day at the same time, Mr Speaker. It's an iterative process where some are cancelled, Mr Speaker. They weren't all cancelled at the same time. It's not like the Chief Executive rings up and says, hey, we just had 6 cancelled. Mr Speaker, yesterday I provided a factual summary to the Australian people on the total number that had been cancelled over the recent period, Mr Speaker. That is what transparency looks like. The alternative is the approach of the Leader of the Opposition, who went to social media on Saturday and said that Australian refineries are exporting diesel and petrol, which is just simply untrue, Mr Speaker. Untrue. And a former energy minister should know better than that.
As the minister's concluded his answer. Order. When the House comes to order and the Leader of the Opposition ceases interjecting. When the House comes to order. I don't know why you can. If I give an instruction to cease interjecting, it's not the time to keep interjecting, Leader of the Opposition. So we'll just wait till the House resets and we'll hear from the honourable member for Ford.
My question is to the Treasurer. What is the impact of the conflict in the Middle East on Australia's economy? How is the Albanese Labor government approaching this challenge?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The member for Ford's already an outstanding local member in our part of South East Queensland. And while I'm talking about outstanding local members, I also acknowledge Joe Kelly up there in the gallery, up there with Dave McDermott. It's nice to see you too, mate. The conflict in the Middle East is weighing heavily on global markets today and on the global economy more broadly as well. Our own Australian economy is very well placed, but we're not immune from these pressures. We've got faster economic growth than any major advanced economy. We've got low unemployment, lower public debt than the major advanced economies as well. But we do know and we do understand that Australians are feeling the pressure around the kitchen table and especially at the petrol bowser, Mr Speaker. Now, the two key considerations here are how long the war drags on for and how long it takes for supply chains to normalise afterwards. I've asked Treasury to model a number of scenarios. I released them publicly last week. They are conservative, but they still show a hit on growth and substantial pressure on prices. Now, these pressures don't replace the challenges that we had before the war, but they do exacerbate them. And that's why we are taking a number of steps, as the Energy Minister and the Prime Minister have already mentioned in today's question time. Releasing hundreds of millions of litres of fuel, temporarily amending the fuel standards, working with international partners, and also empowering the ACCC to go after any suppliers or retailers who are doing the wrong thing, with the tougher penalties that I'll introduce to this parliament later this week. And they're also working with the industry to get supply where it is most needed. I also wanted to alert the House, Mr Speaker, to a meeting I convened on Friday of the Council of Financial Regulators, which was to ensure that our markets are operating properly and that they are working through and thinking through all of the risks, Mr Speaker. But we do have a strong, well-regulated and resilient market, but we are not complacent about that, and nor are the financial regulators, Mr Speaker. Now, this conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East is the major influence on our economy, and it will be a major influence on the budget as well. Now, we will continue to work through these issues in a considered and methodical way, but also in an urgent and decisive way as well, Mr Speaker. We know that Australians are feeling the pressure at the petrol pump and around the kitchen table. That's the government's focus as we work through the decisions and deliberations that lead up to the budget in May.
Call to the member for Flinders.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, and I refer to the national fuel crisis. How many service stations in Australia have run out of fuel?
Put the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question. I'll have these figures state by state. In New South Wales at the moment, it's 37 out of a total of 2,444 service stations. In Queensland, it's 47 outlets with no diesel, 32 with no regular unleaded out of just over 1,800 service stations. In Victoria, at the end of last week, we saw 109 outlets with one or more grades unavailable, as how the Victorian government collects that information. Today's update is around 50 stations out of diesel. I have further updates for Western Australia, more by supplier than service station, but I am pleased to say, and I've been speaking to some Western Australian members opposite about this, that we are seeing more fuel flow in Western Australia and those numbers come down.
Call to the honourable member for McEwen.
My question is to the Assistant Treasurer Minister for Financial Services. How is the Albanese Labor government protecting consumers and maintaining economic stability in the face of heightened global volatility?
The call to the Assistant Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services.
I thank the member for McEwen for his question, and I acknowledge his long history in the transport sector and his advocacy for that sector and the workers in it. The Albanese government is firmly focused on protecting Australian consumers and maintaining economic stability at a time of heightened global volatility. Australia enters this period from a position of strength. Our economy is resilient, our banking system is well capitalised, and we are well placed to withstand the impacts of volatile global markets. We know that many Australians are under pressure, in particular given recent shocks to energy prices, which is why our government continues to roll out responsible, targeted cost-of-living relief. This includes 2 further tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer, cutting student debt, cheaper medicines, cheaper childcare, and making it easier and more affordable to see a doctor. We're also backing increases to minimum and award wages, delivering cheaper energy, free TAFE and boosting government-funded paid parental leave. Our plan is about easing the cost of living pressures now while also building stronger, fairer and more competitive markets for the future. On the 11th of March, the Treasurer, the Minister for Climate Change and Energy and the Assistant Minister for Competition announced a major consumer protection package, doubling penalties for false or misleading conduct and cartel behaviour to $100 million per offence. This is a 10-fold increase since we came to government. Also directing the ACCC to step up weekly fuel price monitoring and working with industry to boost fuel supply, including supporting ACCC authorisation to coordinate supply where needed. The ACCC have held an emergency meeting with fuel companies, pressing them to explain recent rapid price increases and providing detailed supply chain information that the ACCC will now scrutinise. The regulator again warned the sector against any collusive, anti-competitive or misleading conduct. On the 19th of March, the ACCC launched an enforcement investigation into alleged anti-competitive conduct by Ampol, BP, Mobil and Viva, following reports about diesel availability for independent wholesalers in regional and rural areas. The ACCC has also urgently authorised fuel suppliers to coordinate supply, with conditions that prioritise independent distributors and protect fuel access for regional communities. We are strengthening competition across the economy, from cracking down on unfair trading practices in the supermarket sector and strengthening unit pricing laws to investing in food security in remote communities. We know many people are doing it tough. That's why we're working to ensure Australian consumers, no matter where they live, benefit from fairer prices, more transparent markets and stronger competition across the entire economy.
Call to the honourable member for Flynn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, and I refer to your previous answer with respect to supply of diesel at service stations in the East Coast states. Could the Minister supply us with information on lack of diesel and fuel at service stations in the Northern Territory, South Australia and Tasmania?
Good call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, Mr Speaker, we'll continue to work with the states cooperatively through the National Cabinet and through Energy Ministers' Council, which convened on Friday, National Cabinet earlier in the week, and both will convene again soon, and we'll continue to share information. I am participating in a Tasmanian roundtable at the request of the acting. I'm participating this afternoon in a Tasmanian government organised roundtable at the request of the Liberal Minister for Energy in Tasmania, which I'm very happy. I'm very happy to participate in. I can report to the House, Mr Speaker, in terms of flow of fuel to regional Australia. The release of the minimum stock obligation, which I approved a little over a week ago, was conditional on fuel flowing to regional Australia.
Well, the minister was asked a question about. Yeah. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Resume your seat, and the manager is now warned. Do not approach the dispatch box. We'll hear from the honourable member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering AUKUS across the country, including in my home state of South Australia? How does this compare to other approaches?
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
Well, can I acknowledge the member and her work in contributing to South Australia being at the heart of Australia's defence industry. AUKUS represents the biggest leap in Australia's military capability in more than a century, but it is also the largest industrial project in our country's history. 20,000 jobs, engaging the industrial base of the eastern seaboard. It already represents the biggest diversification in the West Australian economy in decades, and it will see our future submarine built in South Australia at the Osborne Naval Shipyard. Now, in coming decades, $30 billion will be invested here. And just over a month ago, the Prime Minister and Premier Malinauskas announced a $3.9 billion down payment on this. At its peak, the shipyard will be home to those sustaining the Collins-class submarines, building our Hunter-class frigates and building our future submarines, which in total represents more than 7,000 workers, the biggest industrial site in our country. We will see steel being cut on our future submarines by the end of the decade. And already work is underway in constructing the submarine yard. This is a project which is being delivered, and we are really fortunate to have the Malinauskas State Labor Government as our partner. And they see that Osborne is central to the South Australian economy. Indeed, South Australia rightly and proudly declares itself the defence state. And so it's no surprise to me that on Saturday the South Australian people roundly endorsed the economic agenda of the Malinauskas government with its thumping re-election. And I really want to congratulate the Premier and his entire team on their remarkable win. Now, this stands in contrast to One Nation, which have really only ever been about stunts and the vibe, never about the actual delivery of jobs and defence capability. It also stands in contrast to the Coalition, because when they were last in government, they—
Look, the minister was asked about how does this compare to other approaches, so he is dealing with that. So it's going to be very difficult to take a point of order. Yeah. Don't worry. I'm keeping an eye on these questions, trust me. So the minister is being directly relevant because he was asked about comparing directly to other approaches. So, of course, he's going to talk about other parties and other approaches. He has the call.
Well, the Coalition declared that South Australians could not even build a canoe. Indeed, they tried to take the build of our future submarine offshore, and then they literally failed to deliver in the attack class program. Well, that is very different to Labor, because the Albanese and Malinauskas Labor governments in partnership are delivering the Osborne Naval Shipyard, which will be a cornerstone of the South Australian economy for decades to come.
The call to the honourable member for Wentworth.
This question is for the Treasurer. The war in the Middle East is driving gas price spikes, which is great for resource company revenue, but Australians are hurting. This boosted revenue is not a reward for wise investment decisions. It is a byproduct of an unexpected war. Will you impose a windfall tax, as other nations did in 2022, to ensure Australians get a fair share of this wartime windfall from their natural resources?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the member for Wentworth for her question. I wanted to acknowledge the substantial amount of work that the member for Wentworth does when it comes to thinking through options for tax reform, and I also wanted to acknowledge that on the specific question that the member for Wentworth has asked, there are a range of views about the best way forward on that front. From the government's point of view, we haven't changed our policy on that. Our big focus, as you can tell from answers from the PM, the Energy Minister and others, is fuel security. That's our big focus and our big priority, releasing more fuel, securing more fuel in international markets, working with the ACCC and the like. Now, of course, more than believe that it's necessary that Australians receive a fair return from the natural resources that they own, we have taken some steps in the course of the life of this government to make sure that offshore gas companies, for example, pay more tax sooner. That was the motivation behind the changes to the PRRT that we landed in the course of the last parliament. And what that meant was the number of entities paying that PRRT went from 11 to 16 in the most recent data, and you can see that the combination of company tax and PRRT paid by the oil and gas sector has gone up compared to the pre-COVID average. Once again, though, I acknowledge that there are a range of views about it. For our part, when it comes to tax, the big focus is on those tax cuts that we're rolling out in July and next year in July as well, opposed by those opposite but voted for by the member for Wentworth. And any further steps on tax reform would be a matter for Cabinet in the usual way.
We call to the member for Melbourne.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government making medicine cheaper for all Australians? How do cheaper medicines help strengthen Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect?
We call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Melbourne, who is such an amazing advocate for a stronger Medicare. I particularly want to thank her and the member for Maribyrnong for their tireless work in securing a long-term future for that inner Melbourne icon, Co-Health, which we're working on very hard together. But the member also knows how important a strong PBS and cheaper medicines are for her community, Mr Speaker. The PBS is one of the world's best medicine systems. For 8 decades, it has been delivering Australians access to the world's best medicines at affordable PBS prices. And today, that is more important than ever. In a time of turbocharged discovery, where new medicines are coming onto the market at a huge, unprecedented pace every single month. These new treatments using revolutionary technology are highly effective, Mr Speaker, but they're also incredibly expensive. Since we've been elected, we've listed more than 400 new medicines onto the PBS, and this month, just as an example, I'm delighted to say that we listed a new treatment called Ultomiris for a relatively rare condition, myasthenia gravis. This relatively rare condition impacts only about 3,000 Australians, but it can impact their ability to manage everyday tasks very severely, like walking or even chewing or breathing, Mr Speaker. And this is the first new treatment for those patients on the PBS for 30 years. It's going to make a huge difference to their lives. But without this listing today, those patients would have to pay $25,000 for every single script. From this month, instead of $25,000, they'll pay just $25, Mr Speaker. And that is the beauty of the PBS, the world's best treatments here in Australia at affordable PBS prices, Mr Speaker. And as the member for Melbourne knows, we've been busy over the last 3 or 4 years making those prices even more affordable, Mr Speaker. Since we were elected in 2022, Australia's pensioners and concession card holders have received about 90 million scripts completely free of charge as a direct result of the changes we made to the safety net, Mr Speaker. And their maximum script price, Australia's pensioners, will be locked in at $7.70 and frozen for the rest of the decade, Mr Speaker. And for those many Australians who don't have the benefit of a concession card, general patients, their PBS script prices are now no more than $25, the same price they were way back in 2004, Mr Speaker. These changes already have saved Australians more than $2.3 billion at the pharmacy counter, with more being saved every single day, Mr Speaker. It's good for their hip pocket, but it's also incredibly good for their health.
Call to the Leader of the Nationals in the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Agriculture, and I refer to the national fuel crisis. Fertilizer Australia has written to the government warning that further shipment disruptions will, and I quote, have catastrophic impacts on domestic agricultural output in the 2026 season. Given that the price of fertilizer has doubled, what is the government's plan to secure fertilizer for Australian farmers?
Call to the Minister for Agriculture, Fishery and Forestries.
And I do want to thank the member opposite for that question. And obviously fertiliser, as I said last week, is a significant input into our agriculture sector, and it is very important. And I've certainly been working with the Minister of Industry to see what we can do in relation to fertiliser in Australia. As I said last week, we have enough fertiliser either in Australia or on ships in terms of the initial cropping season. And certainly we're getting a lot of input from farmers about fertiliser prices, and we have been working with the AUKUS about how we work with them, as we have in relation to fuel for fertiliser and what needs to be done there, so that we can ensure that fertiliser is getting to the people that need it most. As a government, we are aware that some cargoes booked for Australia are delayed in the Persian Gulf, and we continue to monitor it. We do source urea fertiliser from other regions, and we're working with industry to seek alternative supplies. In the same way, as I said, that we are working with the ACCC and industry for fuel, we are working with them in relation to fertiliser. We do continue to monitor this situation, and I'm having weekly meetings with the agriculture sector in relation to fertiliser, and we're in regular contact with Fertiliser Australia on how we might first source more fertiliser as Australian farmers need it. And we have been doing the work to make sure that Australian farmers can have certainty when it comes to future crops.
Call to the honourable member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering for workers, including in South Australia? How does this compare to other approaches?
Call to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Adelaide for his question. Of course, he is a proud South Australian, always standing up for the City of Adelaide, but of course the whole of South Australia in this place. Now, the Albanese Labor government's #1 focus is delivering cost of living relief while building Australia's future. Our Labor government has delivered significant workplace changes and investment in critical industries to deliver better outcomes for working Australians, including, of course, for South Australians. I'm very pleased to inform the House that, in good news in my home state of South Australia, more people are in work and, of course, they are earning more. Now, in the last 4 years, South Australia's unemployment rate has dropped from 5% in March 2022 to 4% in February 2026. That is an extra 90,000 people in work, and that is good news. And compare that to 4 years ago, the average South Australian full-time worker is now earning an additional 19% extra in wages. Again, good news for South Australians. 200,000 workers in South Australia are benefiting from our government's advocacy to the Fair Work Commission for a real wage increase to the minimum wage. And of course, these workers are also benefiting from the action our government took to protect penalty and overtime rates. Now, we're creating well-paid jobs in South Australia, and it hasn't happened by accident. It's because of state and federal governments working together to deliver. The state Labor and federal governments have worked in close partnership and have jointly invested to back over 1,000 workers at the Whyalla Steelworks. Action was critical not only to save jobs in South Australia, because it is in our national interest that we have structural steel-making capacity in this country. And together with the Malinowskis government, we've made significant investments in the AUKUS program to secure Australia's defence future, capability and, of course, the lasting prosperity for jobs in the state of South Australia. Now, this investment will directly create close to 10,000 highly skilled, well-paid jobs in South Australia alone. And this will provide enormous economic opportunity to lift skills, wages and living standards for generations to come. Not only is this a good thing for South Australia, but is a good thing for the country. And of course, with the re-election of the Malinowskis Labor government, our two governments will continue to work to deliver for South Australians. This is in sharp contrast to the coalition who dared Holden to leave South Australia when they were last in government. They destroyed local car manufacturing. It's only this government that will deliver for South Australia.
Call to the honourable member for Warringah.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Treasurer, I refer to your previous answer. Treasury has downgraded predicted revenue from the PRRT at successive budgets. Will you admit that the government got it wrong and properly secure revenue for Australians from its gas at a time when Australians, primary producers and small businesses need targeted support to meet rapidly increasing costs?
The call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As the honourable member says, I answered part of this question a moment ago in regards to the additional part of it. What we've been able to ensure is that there is more tax paid sooner than would otherwise have been the case. And obviously, when you're dealing with a volatile commodity that we're talking about now, then sometimes the numbers come in lower, sometimes they come in higher than is forecast. Now, on the broader point that the honourable member is making, a bit like the point that her colleague near her was making a moment ago, I do understand that there are a range of views about this. We do believe that Australians deserve a fair return on the resources they own, and that's what motivated our efforts with our PRRT reforms to get more tax paid sooner than would otherwise have been the case.
Call to the honourable member for Spence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry. How is the Albanese Labor government working with the South Australian government to back steel workers in Whyalla? Why is this important for our sovereign manufacturing capability?
Call to the Minister for Defence Industry, the Minister for Pacific Island Affairs and the Minister representing the Minister for Industry.
I thank the member, a proud South Australian, for his question. Speaker, the Albanese Labor government's #1 focus is delivering cost-of-living relief while building a future made in Australia. This will increase our independence and sovereignty and create Aussie jobs. It was at the heart of the progressive patriotism agenda the Prime Minister took to the people in 2022 and 2025. Making steel in this country is central to that. It's just been just over a year since we joined the Malinowskis government to intervene and save the Whyalla Steelworks. A year since we made that critical decision to protect Aussie jobs and strengthen our sovereign manufacturing capability. Our intervention has ensured that not only is the steelworks continuing to operate, but that it has a bright future. Jobs have been protected and created, performance restored. Speaker, the steelworks has been having record-breaking performance across steel, rail and finished goods. Output is at multi-year highs. And while those opposite wrote off Whyalla time and time again, we joined with the community to fight for its future, saving thousands of jobs. Speaker, building sovereign manufacturing capability builds resilience throughout the economy. For example, 52 tonnes of steel used in the construction of the Port Wakefield missile factory came from the Whyalla Steelworks. Aussie-made steel leading to Aussie-made missiles. And Phosphate Hill, Australia's only producer of ammonium phosphate fertilisers, announced earlier this month that it had found a buyer. This was only possible because of the government's intervention to save the Mount Isa copper smelter. Let's be clear, without critical inputs from the copper smelter, we would not have the fertiliser factory. So, Speaker, steel making, copper smelting, fertiliser production, all critical manufacturing capabilities essential to our sovereignty, all opposed by the Liberals. Speaker, the current Middle East conflict reminds us that we need to have an economy that is resilient and sovereign. We need an economy that makes more things here. So when those opposite attack a future made in Australia, they weaken our sovereignty and weaken our resilience. We also need an economy where we train and skill up Australians for jobs that build our sovereign capability. A year ago, there were 7 apprentices at the Whyalla Steelworks. Today, it's more than 70. And now we're in a position where we've got 5 serious bidders looking at purchasing the steelworks. That's great news for workers, great news for Whyalla and great news for Australia.
The call to the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Energy. I refer to your previous answer where you said that shipments carrying vital fuel were cancelled over a period of time. When were you notified that the first shipment was cancelled?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
I refer the honourable member to my previous answers.
Give the call. Order. Members on my left. Give the call. Order. Give the call to the member for Macon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitments to ensure that Australians have a safe and secure place to call home?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Macon for his question and for his fantastic advocacy for more housing in his community. Speaker, our country is confronting a housing challenge that's been building for 40 years, and this is placing a hugely unfair burden on Australians, on young families, Speaker, on women and children who are fleeing family violence, and particularly on that younger generation who are struggling to find a foothold in the housing market. Speaker, that is why our government has built the boldest and most ambitious housing agenda that a Commonwealth government has had in this country since the post-war period. $45 billion, Speaker. We are building more homes, we're getting renters a better deal, and we're getting more Australians into home ownership. Now, Speaker, my job is about delivery, 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 and I want to share with the chamber some of the work of our government over the past week. Speaker, on Monday last week, the member for Fenner and I turned the sod on 315 new homes we are building in Belconnen. The member for Swan turned the sod on 58 Housing Australia Future Fund homes in Riverdale.
Order.
Speaker, on Tuesday, the member for Blair announced 24 new social homes in North Ipswich in his electorate. On Wednesday, the member for Gilmore opened 15 new crisis homes in her community. On Thursday, the member for Barton joined the New South Wales Premier to announce 600 new social and affordable homes that are funded through the Housing Australia Future Fund. Speaker, on Friday, the member for Cunningham opened 6 new crisis homes in her electorate, and the member for Bendigo opened 73 new Housing Australia Future Fund homes in her electorate. Now, Mr Speaker, if I draw you back to Monday last week alone, our government turned the sod on 373 homes. Now, that may sound to the parliament a familiar number, 373, Speaker. That is because that is the total amount of homes that those opposite built in 9 years governing our country. Speaker, I'm not making this up. Last Monday, we turned the sod on the same number of homes that they built in almost a decade, and that is a national disgrace, Speaker. Now, Speaker, these homes join the 570,000 homes that have been built since we came to office, the 6,000 social and affordable homes we've already completed, the 24,000 homes that we've got in planning or construction right now. Now, I've shared a lot of numbers with you here, Speaker, but let me bring it right back to the heart of the matter. Our government understands that housing is not just about bricks and mortar. We are helping Australians build the foundation on which they and their families will grow and build a great life in this beautiful country of ours, Speaker. 55,000 social and affordable homes that will change the lives of 55,000 Australians and their families.
The call to the member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Treasurer. Treasurer, your government has a productivity problem and a worsening cost of living crisis. Every dollar invested in Australian health and medical research yields close to $4 for the Australian economy. Without giving this place a shopping list of other economic data, does the government in the forthcoming budget plan to invest more in medical and scientific research, recognising both the productivity dividend and the positive effect that it would have on the nation's health?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the honourable member for Kooyong for her question. This government, very enthusiastic, very substantial investors in research, including medical research. I pay tribute to my colleague here and thank him for a number of conversations that we've had in the lead-up to the budget in May about this really important question, because we do understand, we do appreciate the link between good research and better outcomes when it comes to productivity and a stronger economy more broadly. And our colleague in the other place, Minister Ayres, has received and now released some good work that we had done when it comes to the future of research and development, and obviously the Medical Research Fund is part of our thinking in that regard. We're going to work through the recommendations of that report and make our views known in due course, but I assure the member, as I have on other occasions as well, that we're enthusiastic supporters and investors in medical research. Now, when it comes to productivity, the beginning of her question, it's important to remember that we've had a productivity challenge in our economy for the last couple of decades now, not just the last couple of years. In fact, over the last year, productivity was 1% through the year, annual, and that's above the 20-year average, but it's still not good enough. It's still not good enough. And market sector productivity was 1.5 in the most recent data. It means it's grown for 5 quarters in a row, but again, we need to do much better to deliver the higher living standards that our people need and deserve. And so I assure the member, the honourable member, that as we work through these issues with productivity, we work through the report on research and development, that will continue to play an important role in the productivity agenda that we already have rolling out, ambitious agenda, but also in the additional steps that we're considering between now and the May budget.
Call to the honourable member for Swan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. How is the Albanese Labor government helping more Australians get the skills they want for the jobs we need with fee-free TAFE and apprenticeships? Are there any risks to this program?
Call to the Minister for Skills and Training.
Thanks, Speaker, and thank you to my friend, the member for Swan, for her question. She's an incredible advocate for learners and apprentices in her community, and I saw that when I went with her to see students at Bentley TAFE to celebrate a $2 million commitment that we made to deliver a state-of-the-art commercial training kitchen through the TAFE Technology Fund. TAFE is breaking down barriers and setting up Australians for the future, and free TAFE is, of course, at the very core of this. This was a policy that this Prime Minister took the 22 election. Australians voted for it, and we have delivered it. And just last week I announced that we've reached nearly 750,000 free TAFE enrolments, 742,000 so far, almost 250,000 course completions, 245,000, plenty more on the way. And this means more opportunities for young Australians like Blake, who I met while he was completing his Cert 2 in carpentry. And for someone like Blake, it means more opportunities after free TAFE 2 as he moves into his career, because the key apprenticeship program is offering $10,000 in incentives to new housing apprentices, people like Blake, to help with the cost of tools and transport, so they can play their part in meeting our national priorities, like building more homes for Australians, more than the 373 social homes the Minister for Housing was just talking about. And, Speaker, in just the first 6 months of this program, more than 11,000 apprentices have commenced in housing through the Key Apprenticeship program, a program that, importantly, is not just helping apprentices but also their employers, the vast majority of which are small businesses. So, Speaker, you'd think the Coalition would support programs that are making a real difference, helping Australians get a good start in great careers and making a contribution. But, of course, the former Leader of the Opposition infamously said of Free TAFE that Australians don't value what they don't pay for. But what about her replacement? Well, we don't know, because it would mean actually saying the word TAFE in Parliament, something he hasn't done in more than a decade, since his idol Tony Abbott was Prime Minister. And he should also clarify for the thousands of apprentices and the thousands of people who employ them his position on the Key Apprenticeship program, given his shadow minister calls it wrong and talks about throwing good money after bad money. Now, Free TAFE is getting thousands of Australians new qualifications in areas of need. We think that's a good thing. The Key Apprenticeship program is backing in thousands of housing apprentices. We think that is a good thing too. Labor, and only Labor, is backing Australians like Blake, backing them to get skills they need for the jobs we need doing.
Call to the honourable member for Monash.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Has the minister sought or received advice from his department on the implementation of fuel rationing?
Good. Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question. Of course, I have engaged with my department in prudent contingency planning, Mr Speaker. As I indicated again on the weekend, the establishment of a national fuel emergency would be a very significant step. It's never been done. That's what would be required. However, states have considerable powers. That's why that's outlined in the National Liquid Fuel Emergency Response Plan, which was agreed by COAG in 2006. That indicates that voluntary restraint, i.e. public information campaigns requesting people to save fuel, would be the first step, and that only after that would any further actions be considered. I made clear, Mr Speaker, yesterday I think we're a long way from that, but of course the Commonwealth and the states will work together for prudent contingency planning in a very challenged international environment.
Call to the honourable member for Bean.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Seniors. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering meaningful aged care reforms for older Australians after a decade of neglect?
A call to the Minister for Aged Care and the Minister for Seniors.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Bean for his question. He does a fantastic job representing the people of Bean, including my old stomping ground of the Tuggeranong Valley. Mr Speaker, there's a critical feature of this Albanese Labor government. We listen and then we deliver. We listen to the Royal Commission. We listen to older Australians and their families. We listen to the workers and the providers who know this system inside and out. And then we got on with fixing it. The sector told us that older people needed rights, not just rules. So we delivered Australia's first ever statement of rights, enshrined in the new Aged Care Act that came into effect on the 1st of November last year, the first wholly rebuilt act since 1997. Older Australians told us they want to stay home for longer, with support that enables them to maintain independence and dignity. So we delivered support at home, along with 83,000 additional home care places. And advocates told us that aged care places should be allocated to people, not providers. So we changed that too. Aged care places are now allocated directly to the individual. More choice, more control, more dignity. Providers told us we need more beds, and we need them in the places where demand is greatest. So this month, we announced a further $115 million through the Aged Care Capital Assistance Program, targeted at hotspots in Adelaide, Illawarra, Perth and the Hunter, with an expression of interest process designed to get beds open within 2 years. That takes our total ACAP investment to over $1 billion since 2022, more than any other government in Australian history. These aren't promises, they're real bets. They're older Australians getting care closer to home sooner. And aged care workers, Mr Speaker, told us that they were undervalued, underpaid and stretched to breaking point. So we delivered the biggest pay rises in the history of aged care, 4 rounds of fully funded increases. Thanks to these pay rises, the average registered nurse in aged care is now earning $28,000 more a year. That's $550 more every single week. Mr Speaker, those opposite spent 9 years in government. They had the same Royal Commission, the same reports, the same workers, the same families, the same older Australians telling them what needed to change. They didn't listen and they didn't deliver. Aged care is a fundamental promise that this country makes to older Australians, that when the time comes, they will be safe, they will be seen and they will be cared for with dignity. This government listens, this government delivers, and we are keeping that promise.
The call to the honourable member for Cook.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. I refer to a report in the Daily Telegraph titled "New South Wales Fuel Crisis Sparks Min's Government to War Game Emergency Powers to Ration and Divert Petrol and Diesel." Has the minister been briefed by the New South Wales Government or any other state government or territory governments on fuel rationing?
The call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. And as I indicated in previous answers, literally there was a meeting of state and territory ministers with me on Friday. Literally. And as I indicated on Friday, we compared notes on contingency planning, Mr Speaker, and our respective powers. There is no Watergate here, Mr Speaker. That is what I announced on Friday. And as I indicated to the member for Monash before, there is the National Liquid Emergency Plan, which was agreed by all governments in 2006 and endorsed by all governments since then as a gradation of changes. And in this environment, Mr Speaker, I would also remind all honourable members of the need for factual information when communicating with the public. I would remind the member for Cook, Mr Speaker, of the need for factual information when communicating with members of the public. I remind the member for Cook that when he went on social media yesterday and said the Australian government is forcing diesel and petrol to be exported, that is a lie, Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. The member for Cook will withdraw that. Thanks, Member Cook. Give the call to the honourable member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister update the House on the visit to Australia by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen? How does this visit further Australia's national interest?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Bendigo for her question. And earlier today, a senior delegation from the EU, led by President Ursula von der Leyen, arrived in Sydney. And tomorrow she will address our parliament, the first woman to address our parliament as a leader of a country or a group of countries when it comes to Europe, the 20th world leader to address our parliament. This is a milestone moment for the relationship between Australia and the European Union, such an important relationship. The European Union represents the world's second biggest economy, and it's already Australia's second biggest trading partner. Our two-way trade is worth some $109 billion. That represents jobs and economic prosperity. And our government has been working patiently and constructively to take that to the next level, to give Australian farmers and growers and exporters better access to a market of 450 million consumers, and to give our friends in Europe the chance to enjoy Australian food and fibre and wine, the best products in the world that we are so proud of. Closer engagement matters for our prosperity. 1 in 3 of Australian jobs is trade dependent. And this follows the work that we've done, repairing the relationship with China, establishing the free trade agreement with the UAE to open up those markets, engaging as well with ASEAN and through APEC, as well with our traditional partners and our partners in this region. The upgrade in the relationship with Indonesia, with India, all makes a difference for us. A free trade agreement with Europe would, of course, strengthen that even further. But as well, we need to engage with Europe on matters of security. Australia has, on a bipartisan basis, been unequivocal in our support for the struggle of the Ukrainian people against Russia's illegal invasion. That will remain the case, and we continue to participate in the coalition of the willing. A security and defence partnership with Europe will deepen that relationship. In a more volatile world, closer partnerships with trusted friends are more important than they've ever been, not just a safeguard against uncertainty, but as a foundation for greater prosperity and greater security. We'll look forward to welcoming President von der Leyen tomorrow. I'm sure it will be a great success. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.